The word Hebrew refers to the people who are descended from Abraham, and that comes from Genesis. I'm sorry, our first reading is from Genesis. We haven't quite moved on. That comes from Genesis chapter 14:13 when he's introduced, and it says, "The one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Anna. These were the allies of Abram." So Abram is described as the Hebrew, and that word just means from the other side, and that is because he crossed the Euphrates River when God called him right at the beginning of the previous module, when we saw the call of Abraham, and he left his family and followed God's call into what eventually ended up in Canaan. He had to cross the Euphrates River, and therefore he was Abram the Hebrew, Abram the man from the other side. That's where the word comes from. So any descendant of Abraham is a Hebrew. And then we saw Abraham's grandson, Jacob, becoming renamed Israel. And so anybody who is descended from Israel is an Israelite. Israelites are therefore Hebrews because they are also descended from Abraham. So when we're talking about the descendants of Jacob or Israel, then they are both Israelite and Hebrew. They are effectively the same thing. There are technically Hebrews who are from other children other than Jacob, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, Israelite and Hebrew are effectively the same people. We, by convention, tend to use the term Hebrew before they made it back to the promised land. So at the point we're in now, they're in Egypt, and from now until the point that they managed to get back to the promised land and set up their nation, we tend to refer to them as Hebrews. After the point they've set up their nation in the promised land, we tend to refer to them as Israelites. That's not a hard and fast rule. You will find that sometimes if they are, even once they are back in their promised land, if they are enslaved or subjugation or other sort of control, then Hebrew tends to be the term that's used instead of Israelite if they're under some sort of oppression. You also find that if a writer is trying to make a distinction between the upper and lower classes of the society in Israel, that they will use Israelite for the upper classes and Hebrew for the lower socio-economic classes. And thirdly, foreigners will tend to use the term Hebrew rather than Israelite all the time, and you'll see that in the New Testament, for example. So it doesn't really matter too much whether you go with Hebrew or Israelite. The term is referring to the same people most of the time. The other terms that will crop up in the future are Judean or Jew. They are not yet Jews. They will become Jews in the future, and we'll see that happen in the monarchy module, because I don't want to give it away, because the kingdom will split, and the break-off faction is the Jews, but they become the only surviving faction. So that those are descendants of the tribe of Judah and one other. So the Jews will come into play later, but at the moment they are all Israelites. The other term that is worth knowing is Israeli, which is a current term that we use today, and that refers to people living in the modern state of Israel, which was created in the 20th century. Israelis are not necessarily Jewish, they're not necessarily Hebrew, and they're not necessarily followers of the Torah or the Jewish Bible, because you can have Christians who are Israelis, you can have Muslims who are Israelis. It is anybody who has the ethnicity of being from the state of Israel. They're not necessarily Jewish. But put Jews and Israelis to the side for the moment, because they don't exist yet. We've just got the Hebrews, who are also referred to as Israelites. I hope that makes sense.
To understand how it all fits together, sign up for our course, Understand the Bible. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a video.